Bible says that Jesus performed miracles. We got to think about that a little bit. Let's read this story in chapter 8, 1 through 4. It says, he came down from the mountainside. Large crowds followed him. That's from the mount where he gave the Sermon on the Mount. So all these crowds are following him. A man with leprosy came up and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said. Be clean. Immediately he was cured of his leprosy. It's easy to miss this part, that Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. The very fact that Matthew has kind of spelled it out that way. You know, he reached out his hand. And this actually word usually means to grasp or to cling to somebody. He grabbed this guy's shoulder or something, which was a remarkable event. If you know how the ancient world viewed lepers, the fear that they had of leprosy. People would cross the street just to stay their distance. They would throw stones at lepers to keep them at a distance, scared to death of it. And Jesus comes up and just comes out and he grasps the leper. There's something pretty far out about that. I mean, this guy was a rejected dude. This guy was outside of society because of his disease. And Jesus grasped him. Well, and so instantly he's healed. A miracle? Yes, indeed. Wikipedia says a miracle is an unexpected event attributed to divine intervention. Yeah, I guess that's what it is. It's also usually a direct suspension or violation of natural law. People will go in and talk about, how the parting of the Red Sea in the Old Testament, that their research has shown that the Bible is true because there was seismic activity and there would have been a seismic sash, a tsunami essentially that would have sucked the water out of there, and then the Jews could have crossed and then it would have rushed back in. And so the Bible's true. No, that means the Bible's false. The Bible said it was a miracle, okay? It wasn't a natural event at all, that they happened to be there, fortunate to be there right at the moment a sesh came through. It says that the waters was standing like walls on either side of them as they went through, okay? That's a miracle. And so I don't know what the appeal is to people. I mean, it's very clear what the claim is here. Our question, real or unreal, miracles. Let's think about this from, let's think about the position that the miraculous is superstition, is not truth, that these are ancient stories when people used to believe in stuff like that. Let's look at this from the standpoint of the naturalist. Here's a statement in a modern biology textbook by Levine and Miller. They say, Darwin knew that accepting his theory required belief in philosophical materialism, the conviction that matter is the stuff of all existence, and that all mental and spiritual phenomena are its byproducts. And from a strictly scientific point of view, rejecting biological evolution is no different from rejecting other natural phenomena, such as electricity and gravity. Okay, so philosophical materialism, the conviction that matter is the stuff of all existence and that mental and spiritual phenomena are its, so somehow matter is causing a mind to exist or spiritual things to happen? No, that's not what he says. Mental and spiritual phenomenon. In other words, apparent mental phenomena, apparent spiritual phenomena. If you're into philosophical materialism, it's matter and energy. There is no place for a mind. We went over that a couple of weeks ago. There certainly is no place for anything spiritual. That's all imaginary. That's all illusory. These are phenomena which are seem to us to be real, but they're really an illusion, and really all there is matter and energy. Philosophical materialism. So obvious that according to them, it's to deny that would be just like denying electricity or gravity. So we put these two statements juxtaposed as they are, and they're basically saying anyone who refuses atheistic materialism is so ignorant, they might as well deny gravity. That's how obvious it is. Well, I really wonder about that. I would say this is basically rhetoric, is what we're being given here. First of all, Darwin never said that, and he didn't feel that accepting his views meant accepting philosophical materialism at all. He was ambiguous on the subject, but even near his death, he said, I still can't believe that the universe is an accident. I think it has to have been called into place. This statement is not true. Look at this. Here is off of the website talkorigins.org. They're an anti-creation website. So these guys are pretty hardcore, naturalistic Darwinism. And these are the 11 central claims made by Darwinism as it's propounded today. So we can count on these guys not to go soft in any way. And so we go down that list. And I'm a person who I am not a philosophical materialist. I used to be. I'm not anymore. I've converted, became a believer in God. I believe in the supernatural all over the place now. But I look at each and one of these 11 positions from modern Darwinism, and I would say I believe all 11 of those. As a matter of fact, there's nothing on this list that rules out divine intervention in addition to these points. Yes, all of these things have been observed. All of these things can be shown to occur. But how does that rule out that there could also be intervention by God? It doesn't. Unless you have a prior commitment, a philosophical, metaphysical commitment to philosophical materialism, what those guys were saying. And so when we look at this statement here, and it wasn't Darwin that knew that you had to be a philosophical materialist to accept this theory, but rather these authors that have that point of view. And in fact, most Christians today believe substantially in Darwinism. And they also believe in divine intervention too, both. And there's nothing contradictory about that. Well, this statement is just simply not true. Notice the implication, though, too, of what they're saying, which is that, it's like we've searched all over the universe, all throughout time and space and beyond, and there is no God, so we have to be committed to materials. Nothing but matter and energy in the universe. How could anyone know that? How could you possibly know that? You see that it is a faith position. It's a decision to believe something that can't be verified. We can verify that gravity exists. We can measure that. We can measure electricity and demonstrate its existence. Where's the verification for philosophical materialism? There is none. It can't be verified. As a matter of fact, for all either one of these authors know, they may very well drop dead someday, and the next thing you know, they're going to be standing face to face with God. And there's not a single way that they could be sure that's not going to happen. Of course, if you have a prior commitment to materialism, then a miracle could never happen, no matter what. Anyone that believes in miracles is superstitious, is foolish, is uneducated. Of course, to the same materialist, morality doesn't exist either in any objective sense. You can make up morals if you want, but they're not binding. They have no objective reality. The same people that would deny the existence of God also think that humans have no significance. What about that? People say, nuh-uh. Uh-huh. Matter. If a human is nothing but matter. Let's say we go out here and we got a fly infestation. So we pass out fly swatters and start swatting flies and gathering them up, sweeping them into this big trash bag, and we finally, are so successful at massacring this fly problem that we've got this immense bag full of flies, and we put it on the scales, and it's 170 pounds of flies. And you realize I could stand on that scale, and I'm 170 pounds. So to the materialist, what's the difference between a sack of flies and a human being? You say, oh, well, they're dead, and this one, you're alive. Oh, so if they were all alive in there, then we would be the same, right? No, there is no difference. The chemical composition, if we broke those down and put them in the blender, me and the flies, and assayed what we got, the chemical composition would be very similar. Quite similar indeed. What? I might have a little more calcium. That matters somehow because I've got bones. To the materialist, that sack of flies and me as a sack of chemical juices are the same. And I find that pretty objectionable. I find it objectionable that guys who make an a priori commitment to philosophical materialism don't realize that they're men of faith. They think over here are the people that are into faith. We are just men of science. And yet you have made a prior commitment that you're going to believe a certain position. Materialists like to say, oh, well, you see, we can't prove the non-existence of God, so it's really up to everyone else to prove his existence. So you can't prove that God's there? Oh, well, then I guess, so we're not men of faith. And so, by structuring the discourse that way, you guarantee that you're always going to win. Since no worldview can ever be proven, you make it so that my opponents always have to prove what they're saying. I never have to prove what I'm saying. And you tend to win debates like that. But in fact, a position has been taken, it has been believed, and there is no way to know whether it's true or not. We flip a coin here. And we say, heads or tails? And you're like, tails. I'm like, I think it's heads. You're like, yeah, you got to prove yours. Mine's right unless you can prove it's heads. Dude, it's either heads or tails, okay? You have no privileged position. And so, I don't know why materialists would even bother to study the world or think that anything like that even matters. Here's what does matter, okay? Here's the question that we need to seriously consider. Might God exist? Is there a possibility that God exists? That's what I would put to those two authors. If they're going to come back and say, no, that's not possible, I'd love to know how they ascertained that. But if we say, yeah, it's possible, then we just crossed over a threshold and we are no longer philosophical materialists. We're saying that he could be there. And if that's possible, that becomes the most important question in the universe. That is a question that dwarfs any other question we could raise. Because if God actually exists, that's probably somebody that we're going to have to deal with sooner or later. That would be the source of all things. That would be the key to understanding the universe, and not to mention my own self and everyone else here on earth. Nothing could match the importance of that question. And anybody who's really honest with themselves has to admit it is possible. Now, I would say, if somebody was honest with themselves then too, the next step would be to try to make contact with this God. And I would think it would be worth a lengthy search and a sacrifice and deep inquiry to try to discover whether God could be there and whether it might be possible to get in touch with him. Why not? This would be, I knew this long before I believed in God. Even when I was a materialist, I knew if there were a God, that would easily be the most important thing in the universe. Nothing else here could compare to it in importance. Well, let's think about Jesus, and let's do a little theology of miracles tonight. So suppose you were there at the time, you're back there, and here comes Jesus Christ, and he's like, guess what? I'm here from God, and I'm the Son of God. I'm the fulfilled prophecy I'm the guy that's been promised for hundreds of years, the Savior of the human race, okay? I'm the Messiah. Would you believe in him if he didn't perform miracles? I wouldn't. They wouldn't have. Of course not. Imagine a person coming in here and saying, the thing you got to understand about me, I'm the Son of God. It'd be like, right. Show us a miracle then. Make that chair raise up. So they do something miraculous. And if a person's, reached over and said, you, and the guy is a leper, and he put his hand on him, and the guy was instantly healed, a guy from my village, a guy I know, I'd be like, dude, did you just see that? I can't believe. And so what I'm saying is, it's to be expected that Jesus performed miracles. And if he didn't, I don't think anyone would have listened to him. The resurrection of Christ from the dead is like the biggest, that's a first-class miracle right there. I don't know what more you could do than that. And according to Paul, if you don't believe in that, then we have nothing to talk about. That all of Christianity is false. The authors of the New Testament are liars, including, he says, himself. He says you can write everything off. He says your faith is worthless, your sins are not forgiven, and you're wasting your time. In fact, you're pitiful. You are of all men most to be pitied if Jesus didn't rise from the dead. So, it's like, deal with it. We're into the supernatural, and I hate it when you come in, and I used to have this problem. Like I would come in as a Christian believer. I was already now had become a believer, and then I would come to the Bible, and I would read a miracle account. And then I would have this feeling like, dude, I don't know if I believe that happened. That's pretty far-fetched. And it's like, far-fetched for who? God with a big G or God with a little g? It's like there is no far-fetched when we bring God into the picture. And so that's just where we are. Presuppositions. We're dealing with our assumptions here. Now, here's a couple of interesting questions that people, I've asked myself these questions. Say, okay, so you accept that miracles are real, that they did happen, and really that they still happen. Then why don't they happen more often? Why isn't God just doing miracles, just boom, 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 all over the place all the time? How come everyone that's sick that we just can't walk up and heal that person right here now? Or this question, how come smaller miracles seem to be more common than big miracles? You ever notice that? This is what skeptical people notice. It's like, I prayed and then I found my wallet that I'd lost. And so it was a miracle. Okay, could be. The arm I lost, I've been praying about that and it's still gone. And it hasn't grown back. So it's like, it seems like a lot of these smaller type things seem to be happening a lot. And then, so a lot of it seems like maybe it's, people take this to be, so you're just interpreting that it's a miracle. It's like, how do we even know that's real? The small things that happen. Why aren't there more big things? One thing that has occurred to me on this is, imagine a situation where there were giant miracles happening all over the place all the time. Where anybody was sick, a Christian could just come up and they would be healed. Where God would appear in front of people, stuff like that. Where would the place for faith be at that point? It does seem, it says in the book of Hebrews that faith is the assurance of things not seen. Sure. I mean, if God came down and led a parade down the street, whatever, God could probably appear right in front of each and every one of us and tell us everything we ever did, every thought. But then where's the place for faith at that point? And this is what God's chosen. There are rules here, for one thing. Most of the world hurdles forward on a basis of cause and effect. God is not controlling what's happening here, and that's the way things work. It's set up that way. We have to accept that. And what it means is that, when Thomas, who was a major skeptic, he said, I won't believe Jesus rose from the dead until I can put my finger into the holes they poked through him. And boy, was he shocked when he's having lunch and all of a sudden through the wall comes Jesus Christ. Thomas, here you go, buddy. Stick your finger in there. Well, Thomas knew who it was. Instantly, he fell to the ground. He cried out, my Lord and my God. Finally, he really understood. And Jesus said, well, Thomas, he says, now that you see, you believe. Blessed are those that don't see and believe anyway. Yeah, because Jesus is not going to come up to every one of us and say, okay, touch it and feel his wound. And Jesus knew that most of us are in a position where he calls on us to believe, and we don't always get to see. Believe enough, at least to call out to him, at least to call on him to come and manifest himself in your life, and he will answer that prayer. But that's why I think we don't see massive miracles happening all the time. Why do we see miracles? Let's think about miracles in the Bible. A lot of authors that I have read have been very struck, and not just Christian authors, but non-Christian authors as well, with how the miracles that are described in the Bible are very different from what we read in mythology, where a lot of the miracles that happen in ancient mythology are just real creepy, weird things that happen for no apparent reason. Turning a prince into a frog, stuff, weird things like that. Whereas in the Bible, there seems to be a logic behind the miraculous. You see clusters of miracles during periods in biblical history where God is introducing a major change in direction, like the ministry of Jesus. This is a new program that's coming in, the new covenant. And so it's accompanied by a wealth of miracles. You see the same thing in the book of Acts, where there are massive numbers of miracles there. You see it in the Old Testament in the time of Moses, with the 10 plagues and all the other things that happen there. They're key points. God sends clusters of miraculous events to reassure people, this is me. You can trust this. You can go with this. At other times, we see a class of miracles in the Bible that are there to protect the people of God, where they're under attack and God causes their enemies. He causes a heavy hailstorm to fall down on their enemies and chase them away, stuff like that. Or they're going to kill Peter, and he sends an angel and busts him out of jail, stuff like that. You see God using miracles to validate key leaders and prophets at various points in history. And this is why an axe head suddenly floats up through the water, healings. At other times, the miracles are making some sort of a theological point. That's especially true in the ministry of Jesus. Jesus' miracles, very contentful. Sometimes it's expressing God's view of marginalized, unloved people, that God loves the rejected people in the world. That's like this guy tonight that he just talked about, that Jesus reached out and he touched a leper. There's a statement there. The guy says, if you were willing, you could heal me. He said, I am willing. And he grasped him. To grasp the leper, what is that saying? It's a picture. And it's a saying that God's a God of love, and he comes right out, and he doesn't love the popular and the rich and the powerful only. He loves all, including the marginalized. Sometimes it's God's view of sin. We'll see that next week. Sin and forgiveness. And he uses healings and miracles to illustrate that, to show his authority. When Jesus calmed the storm, they said, whoa, he's got authority to command the wind to stop. That's authority. He's in charge here. His own authenticity, of course. Even Jesus said, look, if you don't believe me because of who I am, believe because of the things I do. How do you explain these miracles I'm doing? And they'd be like, I don't know, but we're going to get you anyway. The nature of true faith. That's illustrated, and he purposefully, at times, will hold back on the miracle and have a dialogue that's supposed to unfold for us the meaning of true faith. And also his superiority over the demonic, over evil spirits, which was very important, at a time when people were perfectly well aware that Satan is real. And so, as we read on here in Matthew 8, Jesus says to the leper, now healed, see that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priests and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Often we'll see this in the early part of Jesus' ministry. He kept telling people, they'd say, so you're the Messiah, aren't you? And he'd be like, don't tell anyone about it. And it's like, why is he trying to keep it down? A few times he gives the reason. He says, my hour has not yet come. That's why. He knew that if it came out that he was saying, I am the promised Messiah, that there would be a reaction that it would result in his death. And although Jesus never doubted that he was going to be killed, he needed a certain amount of time to get his teaching done before that happened. My hour has not yet come. Later, when he's coming into Jerusalem, they said, you should shut these people up. They're calling you the Messiah. And he says, I will not shut them up. And if they were quiet, the rocks would cry out. It's because his hour has come. So, secondly, we see that he sent the leper to the priests. That is from Leviticus 14, and it says there, if a leper gets healed, he has to go and demonstrate to the priests that he's clean and there's an offering and so forth. So it was partly in compliance with the law, but it was also, like he says, a testimony to them. We think of the priests in the New Testament as being against Jesus, but that was mainly the high priests. Actually, many of the priests we read in the book of Acts became believers, and possibly some like these who saw this guy, knew him, and realized that he had truly been healed. Here's another one. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. Lord, he said, my servant lies at home, paralyzed and in terrible suffering. So a centurion is a Roman commander of 100 guys. So this guy's not Jewish. This is the NIV, which translates my servant. Some versions say my son. The word is my boy. They have a different word for son. It could be his son. But I think it's not unlikely. I kind of am inclined, I'll explain later, why I think this is likely that correct here. It's his servant. And so Jesus said, okay, I'll go and heal him. The centurion replied, Lord, I don't deserve to have you come under my roof. But just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. That one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. And he uses the same term. When Jesus heard this, he was astonished. And he said to those following, I tell you the truth, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. And so, and that's pitiful, because if anyone should recognize and know the Messiah, would be the Jewish people who have the scriptures and stuff, right? This guy is not even one of them. This is a Roman Gentile. Jesus says his posture, he describes it as faith. And I can see three reasons why he characterizes it that way. It's his confidence in the power of God. He has no doubt about God's power to heal his guy. And when it's expressed according to his will, that's important. So the difference between, when they say, if you're willing, you can heal, there's a difference between that and the position of magic, where I'm going to believe so hard. It's like I'm going to image this and believe it so hard. It's like, I'll just believe it so hard that it'll happen. And that's kind of a new age version of faith, where all the oomph is coming up from me. That's not biblical faith. Biblical faith is like, okay, God, what do you want? And that's what I want to believe in, because if you want to heal him, I know you've got the power to do it. And also the fact that he recognized that God's will and his power would be expressed through his word. He says, just give the word. And I know how that works, because I'm in command and soldiers, and that's all I have to do, and I'm sure that's all you have to do. The word of God, yes. So God working his will, using his power through his word, and that's exactly what biblical faith anticipates. Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, and it will be done just as you believed it would." And his servant was healed at that very hour. I don't know whether this is the same story as the one in John chapter 4. It's hard to say. Now, see the significance, though, of this. Okay, why is this being brought up? Jesus says in the next couple of verses, he says, "I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So it was significant, according to Jesus, that here you have a Gentile with more faith than the Jewish people. And as a matter of fact, Rabbinic Judaism at this time was becoming increasingly an ethnic religion. So that they kind of felt like we're in there, okay, no matter what, whether we believe or not. And that was a huge mistake. And this miracle would be an example where he uses his authority to declare that God is not into race religion, and that he's not a respecter of persons, that there is no partiality with God. And so then, one related miracle, in 14:15, Jesus came to Peter's house, and he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her instantly. She got up and started to wait on. So it's just another, this time, it's a woman, the unimportant gender. That's the way they were viewed. I mean, in the ancient world, women were just, they were chattel. They were the possession of their man. They had a low view of women. And so he heals a woman. We read one last note that when evening came, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed. He cast out the spirits with the word, and he healed all who were healed. It's an interesting verse. Easy to miss. But notice what it's saying. You see for yourself that the Bible knows the difference between demon possession and illness, right? Some were demon possessed. He cast out the spirit. Others were sick. He healed them. And that's very unusual. If you read ancient literature, they thought all illnesses were caused by demons. They didn't have this category. And yet, when we turn to the Word of God, there it is right there in front of you. Okay. So let's pack this together, what we've read here. 4 miracles, boom, 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 boom. The first is a leper, right? An outcast from society. Somebody people would stay 100 yards away from and shout at and curse if he tried to come near. The second, a Gentile. Somebody not in the chosen race. They routinely called Gentiles dogs. You see this in the New Testament even. So they had a very low view of them. They didn't believe in talking to Gentiles unless it was absolutely necessary. And they definitely didn't believe in ever entering the house of a Gentile. That's probably why when Jesus said, "I'll come to your house," the centurion said, "I don't need you to come under my roof." He knew that would be considered uncool. A slave gets healed, the lowest of the low. I mean, if there's anything that's marginalized, what's more marginalized than a slave? And finally, a woman, the unimportant sex. Ask yourself then, I do, is this a coincidence? I don't think so. Remember, the author of this book is Matthew, the tax collector, one of the supreme rejects of their culture, and somebody who Jesus pushed right through and said, "You, come and follow me." And he put him on as one of his disciples. Matthew knew Jesus' attitude toward the marginalized people, and he taught it, and he's teaching it in this passage. And so, it's not just that they were unimportant, it's that God loved them. That's why he grasps the leper. That's why all of these things are happening. It's an expression. Jesus is reaching out to these people. He's showing them, I'm real. I'm the one you've been waiting for. And of course, the lesson for us should be clear. He loves you also. I wonder if you're sitting here right now, maybe because God has brought you to this place. Jesus saw used this miraculous power to authenticate himself. It showed his love for the unloved. And even severe problems, as bad as leprosy, as bad as paralysis, didn't matter what it was, his power was fully adequate to rescue anyone. And so the Bible teaches he wants to express his love to you, as he says in a few chapters, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." That's an awesome passage, because Jesus is basically saying, look, I'm not going to call on you to be a do-gooder, all right? I'm the one that's done the work here. I've already paid the price, okay? But you need to come to me if you're burdened and if you want rest. It's an open invitation to every one of us to enter a personal relationship with God through Jesus. You got to think about that. Maybe you should do that tonight. Maybe you should just in your own heart, just like tell God, okay, I'll come to you. I'm pretty weary. I've had it with being alone. I've had it with this feeling inside that something's missing in my life, that I'm not fully experiencing what I should be in life. And it may be that it's because I don't have God in my life. Maybe that's exactly what it is right there. Yeah, I went to church when I was a kid or whatever, but I never invited God into my life like this. So you should think about that. And in a few minutes, I'm going to give you a chance to do that. All right.